Hello everyone and welcome back to another week of daily racing. So, just to make it short, I'm gonna start with daily race A, which is Watkins Glen long course, only 3 laps with this Radical. And I think it's actually a pretty fun combination and you can expect some pretty decent racing in here. So moving on to daily race B, which is Kyoto Driving Park Yamagiwa. Again, I don't know how many times they featured this race in the last couple of weeks, but there we have it. Once again, we got the Yamagiwa, but now it's in Group 3, 5 laps, and I actually enjoyed the racing in here, so the racing is pretty good in this daily race B. But now, let's go into daily race C, which is the Nürburgring 24-hour version and 4 laps. You're probably wondering, how can you do 4 laps? I mean, how can you even make it in 30 minutes? You can make it if you use the Red Bull X 2019, because yeah, this car is incredibly fast and it's also incredibly difficult to manage this car and even to finish the race without spinning out. So not only they decided to bring the time trial that we already had last week, now it's the race. It's the same race that was used in the World Series or in the World Finals of the Nations Cup, and we've seen some incredible driving in there. So I'm not sure how this is going to look like in the lower split lobbies, or if anyone is even going to do this in the lower splits, but from my experience, racing can be quite chaotic. But if you're racing with someone that knows how to race, it can actually be a pretty enjoyable combination. I just wanted to show you how this looks like. So as we go onto the leaderboards, P1 in the world 6:13.2. I did, I would say, a fairly decent lap in a 6:16.8, and I thought it was actually a good lap. But a lot of spins, a lot of crashes, a lot of penalties, and a lot of very chaotic driving, and I think this is one of the most difficult combinations that we've ever had, if not the most difficult combination that we've ever had. So guys, I'm just gonna go with my first race, which did not end up pretty good, and I will explain what eventually got me to P15 in the world and what I did after and how I managed to recover my pace and eventually finish the race without spinning out. So I think it's finally time that we begin. Oh boy, let's start with this one, and definitely it's one of the most difficult combinations that we've ever had in this game. Just as I said in the intro of this video. So you can see me trying to brake very late into turn 1, which is usually not a good idea, and you can also see a lot of cars around me just flying off. A lot of contacts, a lot of damage, and eventually I managed to get out of that turn intact. So I think Manu had a little bit of damage, that's why he was slightly slower than me on the straight, and he was also carrying a lot more downforce. So my first setup that I tried was just trying to lower down the downforce so I have more straight line speed and I can eventually overtake on the straights, because in the corners it's quite difficult. I mean, if you don't have the speed on the straight, I don't think it's even possible to overtake cleanly. So it's not even halfway through the lap and already Alex has a 5-second penalty. I don't know how he got it, but it was probably because he kicked someone off the track, and yeah, it usually ends up like that. A lot of carnage, a lot of chaos, and you can also see a lot of drivers around me just losing it and ending up in the grass. So this is just the beginning. I have to say that you will see a lot of crashes, a lot of unconventional moves, and something that you cannot anticipate or predict. So P12, I was kind of pushed a little bit wide in there, even though I don't think this is intentional. It's just about controlling the car and not losing it. And you always want to control your car and not lose it. And if you just touch someone in the process, I guess with these cars I can say that it's not dirty driving, it's just difficult to drive it. So yeah, P13, and I am at the back of Verstappen. Actually it's mid Verstappen, very interesting nickname in the game. And now I was thinking about bomb drafting in, but I also think that he had a little bit of damage on the front wing because they had a bit of a contact earlier on. So you can see the difference in speed, and it's not a small difference. So 300 and almost 40 kilometers per hour, while he was doing maybe 320. So I try to go on the outside of the turn, which is usually not a good idea, but somehow it was all clean. 4th gear on the way out. You're probably thinking, why aren't you using third? Because in third it's probably gonna be a spin, and of course if you're using less downforce than it's recommended, then it's most likely gonna end up in a spin. So now going through this twisty section, and you can see a 5-second penalty, people once again off the track, and yeah, I thought he was actually gonna destroy my race in here if it touches me, because it's just a little tap and this car is spinning, but somehow he was ghosted and he eventually rejoined the track safely. But you can see that the guy in front of me is dancing all around the place, so this car is incredibly difficult to control. Especially second, even third gear sometimes can spin you out, so sometimes you actually want to be in that higher gear. Well, most of the time, as you probably can witness it in here, just a little tap and two guys are off the track. But as I was saying before, you always want to be in that higher gear to cause less rotation of the rear end. And once again, I was running like a lot less downforce than the other guys, which of course you will see that I paid the price for it later. But overtaking on the straight is now easier, but in the corners I'm slower. But then I can see a big shunt in the front and I have to slow down quite a lot. Usually in this corner you carry just about 250 kilometers per hour, sometimes a little bit less, depends on the conditions. And you can see a couple of taps and again I have damage and the guy in front of me has a 3-second penalty. So I wasn't quite sure how he got it, but it was, yeah, it was a big pile of drivers just, I guess, just trying to survive. I don't even know how to explain it. And then this incident happened, which again, I really don't know how to explain, because that was definitely not intentional, but I really had nowhere to go. I was on the inside, I was very close to the curb and there was enough space. So I just decided to move on and, I don't know, just try to survive for the next couple of laps, because I was down into P11 and a lot of guys in front of me had penalties, a 2-second penalty, damage, and this happened once again, completely unintentional. I decided to see what can I do on the outside, which I thought there was enough room, but there wasn't enough room and I ended up in the grass. So yeah, I guess this kind of explains this race so far, and this is only 5 minutes into the race, excuse me, 6 minutes into the race, and not even one lap done. So this is what you can expect in low rated lobbies. And even, by the way, this was a top split and you can see how many penalties, how many incidents. I mean, it's really hard to explain and just to describe the feeling when you're racing in here. You're always thinking about that you're gonna lose it, and then eventually I lost it. Yeah, I did lose it. Not intentional, definitely not intentional, but I thought I had enough grip, but I didn't. Once again, I don't even know how many times I've seen yellow flag in this race. I truly cannot even, I mean, I don't even know the number. Like every 2 corners it was a yellow flag, someone was spinning out, something happened. But I managed to once again get up to P11, so it was kind of a nice move, it was clean, but the driver almost lost it behind me. So he kind of managed to get the car once again onto the track, but once you started losing this car, it's very difficult to recover it, because with all of the downforce, the car just tries to push you around, and just not allowing you to correct it the way you want it. So when you lose it, the car takes control. So when you lose the grip, you're pretty much done. And Alex here, just in front of me now, he had a little incident once again. I don't know how many times that we've seen an incident, but he also had damage, so I decided to maybe try to go on the outside, see if it works, and eventually it did work, and I almost lost the car. So I don't know honestly how I've managed to do that, but I was back into P10. But now, look at this now. So this is one of the most interesting moments that I had. The car just didn't have enough downforce. It basically started flying, and when I hit the road, it snapped and I completely lost it. So moving into lap 3, I've done my pit stop, I've managed to survive the rest of the lap, and now I'm on a grippier tire, something that should allow me to push a little bit more, and maybe that I'm not gonna feel the lack of downforce that much. So I decided to go on this move, and luckily I think he lifted, otherwise it would have been, most likely would have been a crash. But at this point I really had nothing to lose. I was just about 20 seconds off the lead, and it was kind of a recovery drive, like from all of the mistakes, from all of the damage that I had so far. And of course there is a yellow flag once again, and you can see how slow the driver in front of me is moving. So You can count how many times that we had this yellow flag, but nothing prepared me for this one. The driver completely losing it in front of me, and I crash into him, of course. Damage, and we move on. I guess we move on. So, P8, I thought my race was actually going pretty good, and somehow I got back into P9, and once again the driver in front of me loses it. So, you can count how many incidents we had. I mean, how many yellow flags, how many incidents, and of course, how many spins I had in this race. So, once again, I kinda lose it. I mean, not kinda, I lost it. And, I mean, nothing prepared me once again for touching the curb in here, because my race was looking pretty bad. And when the tires started to wear out, I just had no grip once again. And even touching the curb by a little bit like this meant, well, a most certain crash. And of course, once again, losing a lot of grip, losing a lot of aero, and this might be one of the first times in a while that I rage quitted out of the race. But then, I decided to do something. I decided to actually run a stock setup. So this is the setup I was running later on. Before that, I was running a lot less downforce, and you can see how it ended up. So I do recommend using a lot of downforce with this car. You need it. And only if you have enough confidence that you can run this, try this setup. So this was actually a good recommended setup. I do believe that you can run this in the qualifying and actually can be a pretty decent one. But if you're trying that in the race, please be careful, even if you're on the soft set of tires. But then, I set a really good lap time. I've set at 6:16, which was good enough to push me on pole position for this race. And now I had Mehdi behind. So this was starting to be a pretty competitive lobby. So one of the best guys in the world, once again, just behind me, because he did a 6:17. So he's probably running a little bit of a different setup, but nothing too different. So we pretty much have, I would say, the same car. And I believe that he just had a little bit more confidence than me. But you will see what happens when you just try to push it a little bit more over the edge. So 4th gear, 5th gear, I mean, flat out through the SS, nothing much to do here. And by the end of the lap, I mean, just going through this kind of connection to the Nordschleife, and it's very easy to miss your braking spot because this car understeers unbelievably. Like, it's really unbelievable how this car understeers. And I lose it, I hit up the rear tires, and I had no grip in the next corner. So Mehdi takes the lead, and now I can only just follow him because there is no place where I can go for a move unless it's a straight or he makes a mistake. So 4th gear, just trying to short shift a little bit, not making a big mistake. And 4th gear was usually the most, I'm not going to say the safest option, let's call it the safest option. So there is a way that you can push this car to the limit, but it's really not recommended. And of course, you can now see how much more speed we're carrying, 240, even sometimes 250 kilometers per hour on the medium tires through that section. And in my previous runs, I was not carrying even close to that. So you can now see the difference and how much confidence I got just from running more downforce, and just how much more confident I got over time. So this now is a much better driving experience because, of course, I don't have to deal with traffic, and I don't have to deal with potential damage and potential penalties, and of course potential yellow flags. So I'm flat out, I'm just trying to save a little bit of fuel. Like you can see that I'm short shifting, and you can see how car turns well in here. Pretty incredible difference if you ask me, and you can also see that the rear tires are kind of overheating at this point. But of course, when we get up to the straight, and there isn't much to do here. I mean, I decided to save a little bit of fuel because the slipstream was incredibly powerful in here. So when you get close to someone, I think it's actually recommended to save fuel instead of go for a move. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but with the same downforce, I think it's actually better to save a little bit of fuel and then overtake in the pits. So 3rd gear on the way out, upshifting or short shifting into 4th gear, and just finishing our first lap. And then when I thought, okay, this is like a perfect rate, this is gonna be almost impossible, and then he makes a mistake. And this really shows you how easy it is to make a mistake with this car. So one of the best guys in the world, and I'm just running behind him, and it's, yeah, he loses it. I mean, it's really difficult to keep this car on the road. Just because when you get up to that certain point, you just push a little bit more, just 1% more, and you completely lose the back end. And of course, I decided to pit in lap 2, and he decided to stay out for one more lap on the mediums, which I think it's actually a strategy that you can pull off. So I put a little bit of fuel and of course soft tires, but you can see that I'm not gaining as much. So 20 seconds through this twisty section once again. There isn't much to do. There really isn't much to do. But again, he makes a mistake because I can see the gap dropped from, I think it was 21 seconds to 19 seconds. So it might have been the same mistake because he was probably running less downforce. But now you can see what happens if you're running more downforce and when you hit the curb. Nothing. So the car is planted and the car feels actually really, really good. So at the end of lap 3, he pitted and you can see that my tires are starting to get a little bit more worn out. And this is something that I do recommend. So if you're trying to avoid traffic, I actually do recommend staying on the racing medium tires for 3 laps and only doing 1 lap on the softs, which can save you a lot of time in the end, because if you avoid traffic and the car is lighter and you know, weight means a lot for this car, so you can carry a lot more speed even though you're on a used set of mediums. So try this strategy out, try to see how this is going to work, and maybe it actually works for you. So I tried it a couple of times, I lost a bit of time, so I don't think it's exactly the fastest option, but it could be possible to avoid the traffic and to avoid all of that carnage that is in front of you. But a much better drive, much more confidence in the car, of course, much more downforce, and I managed to pick up P1 in this race. And you can also see the finishing time, 25:58, and it's really a good finishing time for this race. So a lot more confidence, and I was really happy with how I performed in, well, the later stages of my day. So guys, I really hope that you enjoyed in this video, and if you did, you can also hit the like button, or you might even want to subscribe to the channel. So until the next time, well, enjoy and bye.